Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to today's Humpday Hangout. This is the first Wednesday of the month, so it's the focus on training. And we've got an exciting announcement today. The Institute of Fire Service Instructors, the International Institute of Fire Service Instructors, have decided to combine forces with Traditions Training so that we can bring you a whole new cadre of really engaged, hard-charging, hey, good afternoon, incredibly well credentialed and vetted, and just completely off the charts kind of training folks that want to share stuff constantly and have always been a huge part of fire engineering and fire rescue and FDIC and everybody in the fire service who's conscious knows who these guys are. So the Instructor Society is really pleased to say that we're going to be leaning hard on Ricky and Dan and Doug and Larry and Sam and all the good folks over there at Traditions to kind of boost our cadre of instructors and kind of help us take the lead on this because everybody's schedules are so crazy. Ricky being 86 has kind of scaled back on it. Okay, 76. Okay, has scaled back on some of his. It's just accessibility, right? And with everyone's schedules and everybody, working multiple gigs and just trying to make things, work for them, we've decided to create this incredible partnership, and we couldn't be more pleased because it's just a great group of guys, and when you talk about a title like Traditions Training, it just about says it all. The number one aspect of the fire service is that we train constantly, endlessly. The training's never done, and I don't care how basic it is. Even doffing and donning your gear, doffing and donning your pack, starting your chainsaw. If you're not doing that, routinely inside your system, you don't know what you're doing because it's the fundamentals that create the foundations for everything else that we do. If you're worried about high tangle rescue and you really don't know just the basics of rope and rope care, rope maintenance, and all that, you're missing the point. So the tradition of training and drill is so deeply embedded in every aspect of our lives and our culture that it just can't be taken for granted. And it doesn't matter what aspect of the fire service you're talking about, even our writing skills and our speaking skills and our presentation skills, we have to constantly hone those. And that's critical because how we come across in public can make or break a fire or a project that the boss wants us to undertake, whether it's sprinklers or helping them push, uh, smoke detectors and such. It's just critical stuff. So we've got a really great group of people. All of them have kind of unique skill sets and have really diverse backgrounds. So we're just going to kind of go down the horn and everybody's just going to kind of jump in and tell you a little bit about themselves. What their focus on is of their like main interests, and then the things they're doing within their organizations. Because I think everybody is active in a department, whether it's a retirement volunteer situation or a career situation, and a couple of two-hatters I think are with us as well. So with that being said, I'll throw it right over to the boss man of the Traditions Group, and then we'll hear from a rep out of the Instructor Society from Aaron or I think Steve is with us too. So, Ricky, why don't you take it away? Tell us everybody a little bit about Traditions, about you, and what we can hope to see in the next couple of episodes of training.
Hey, thank you, Chief. And once again, thank you from the bottom of our heart for the opportunity. We do anything for you in fire engineering and the Clarion Group, so we'll always be there. Traditions, we're over a decade old now. We started in the early 2000s. Myself and Dan Shaw started the company, and we just had a passion for just going out and speaking and talking and following our mentor Pete Lund. Is that we can't learn everything in a book. You have to go out and actually do it. And we were just trying to meld those two worlds together: the book knowledge with the street smart knowledge, and that's kind of how we got up off the ground. And our cadre of instructors as a core has kind of stayed pretty tight. And now we actually are expanding out. We moved out across the country about 5 or 6 years ago. Easily, we picked up Chief Schultz, one of my biggest mentors and confidants, and keeps me on the straight and narrow. And that expanded our programs out, to chief leadership and chief officer seminars and command stuff. And obviously, we have the authors, Dan and Doug, who wrote 25 to Survive for Fire Engineering. And we're really big, like going out doing lectures, speaking, preaching our message out there each and every day, being combat ready, and then all the other stuff that goes with it. So we just kind of want to get everybody talking about training, what is going across. I think it's a great idea to have a widespread group of people from different areas, rather than just one certain area around Washington D.C., which most of us are. Me, Larry, and Dan, but we have Sam Hittle in Wichita. We have people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and obviously with Aaron and everybody else from Mr. Shaw from Fort Lauderdale, who I don't see on right now. Obviously, we're going to get a good swath across the country. So I think it's important to talk about and hear what other people are doing, hear what other programs are doing. You can't live inside your own little geographic area. You got to get out. You got to see what the world's doing and see if it's going to help your department. So, Chief Eller?
Well, good afternoon, guys. It's this is a new dawning here. I think it's pretty cool. My name's Aaron Heller. I'm chief in Hamilton, New Jersey, and I own On Scene Training Associates. Been doing the Humpday Hangout for ISFSI for quite a few years, and just the same thing. Kind of to reiterate what Ricky's saying is, it's great that we get these opinions from all over the country, different sizes of departments, different styles of departments. And it's what we've always done at On Scene. The same principle. We've been doing this for many, many years. And the key is that we can share so many different ideas just with this panel that we have on today, and different types of experiences. And it's all about training. In the end, it always comes back to training. And it's how you develop your department into becoming what you want it to be, and it's how you get it away from being what it might have been that you didn't like. Yet maintaining, and a good way to put it, maintaining the traditions, maintaining the culture, but yet moving it forward with those thoughts in mind. So I'm stoked to be a part of it. I'm really happy that I'm still part of this, and get to join forces with some great chiefs and some great officers. And it's cool. It's just another option for people to get online, check this stuff out. And even if we just give you one little scintilla of something that you can take back to your firehouse, if this helps your guys, then we're making progress. And I look forward to it. Can't wait. Thank you.
Dan Shaw?
Oh, thanks, Ricky. So as Ricky said, I'm Dan Shaw, Deputy Chief in Fairfax, Virginia, and then also been with Ricky since, I had hair when we first started working together, so that hasn't worked out well for me.
At least you're not 86.
Well, that's a good point. You look pretty good for 86. Hate to see it 96. And as Ricky kind of alluded to, I was fortunate enough with mostly because of some of the mentors sitting around this group, of having the opportunity with my brother from another mother, Doug Mitchell, to put some pen to paper and do 25 to Survive a few years back. And really, I would just echo some of what Aaron just said. That the great thing about groups like this and what we do with the fire engineering group, and then what we get to do at FDIC, and just sitting around this virtual kitchen table, it's very easy to live in a vacuum in the departments which you work in. I often say to some of the people within my organization, I'd love to take you with me to some of these places and see how organizations with a lot less resources and infrastructure are able to get the job done. And really, when you get the opportunity to have this virtual kitchen table like we have here, it should do two things for you. One, make you appreciate what you have, and also if you do have those great luxuries when you do go to a fire, is also you understand the responsibility of that. When you have all that and you have infrastructure and you have the ability to have operations manuals and training, that you have a responsibility to share that with the other organizations that may not have the financial backing that you do, but still are doing the same exact job as. And I come back to something we echo in every class, is that it doesn't matter where you are, paid volunteer, metro department, not a metro department, the fire always gets a vote. And so we are fighting the same enemy across the board. So when we have this opportunity in groups like this to be able to take the lessons we learn, to learn from the mentors we have sitting here and mentors that, in our own organizations, that we can pay that back. We can take those good lessons learned. And this is what really enriches the fire service, and ensure that long after we're gone, that this continues to be the best trade that exists. because one of the things that I always enjoyed, especially when we go to retirements or we're giving acknowledgments for 30 years of service, is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about the accolades you get, the awards you get. No one cares about that. What they care about is when you're given a platform, how do you influence people and what's the impact you have? And this is such a great platform to be able to impact the fire service, cultivate it to what you think it is, not sit on the sidelines and complain about that we're taking the fire service back from someone. I don't know who took it, but it's still here. And you get to cultivate it to what you think it is and really take all those lessons you learn and be able to pay it forward. So another great opportunity, and I applaud everyone for joining us and listening in and contributing, because that's what makes it the fire service so great.
Chief Larry?
Here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, welcome.
Here.
So it's good to be on a group anytime like this. I'm looking across the screen, seeing everybody. There's Chief Halton sitting front and center on the top of the screen, and he started off with just the perfect introduction, which is the piece where we are being pulled in so many different directions with training. That in many ways either we're not focusing on core competency of basic skills, or at times people work in organizations where the level of importance in mastery of that level is just either not valued or being placed second or third or even fourth on the important list. So that's something we've talked a lot. I know the other instructors are talking about the same thing. I think it'll be interesting with people from all over the country on the having an opportunity to hang out and talk. I think we all kind of become insular to our own organizations, and we think that we're the only ones who have these type of challenges and struggles. And I think we're going to find out that it's common no matter where you are, no matter what the patch says, big or small. Everybody's trying to get to the same place. And I look forward to being with this group, challenging our thoughts, not preaching, but really trying to get at the core of why, with so much training opportunity out there, why we're still seeing people and organizations lack competency at core basic skills. And I hope we challenge each other, and at the end, people listening gain some insight. So I look forward to the group. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, sorry. Sammy Hittle just sent a picture of his wife's broken ankle. So,
Wow. Sorry.
Did we lose Mr. Shaw from Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, he may have gotten a run because I believe he was on duty.
No, I see him. I see him over there.
Oh, he is?
Are you with us?
I guess I missed it.
Can you see me okay?
Yeah, don't diss a Shaw.
I understand.
Oh man, I didn't even realize that we got two Shaws.
Yes. So go ahead. Of course, if I saw your first name, we got so messed up in Shaws earlier.
Yes, sir. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm a battalion chief with Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. Just been there for just over 20 years now. I'm the former chief of training, been there for about 5 years, and I just took a lateral transfer over to the position of EMS chief over the last few weeks. So I'm in the middle of that transition right now. It's a very interesting transition, to say the least. A good one, though. It's a good one, though. I got involved with the Hangout several years ago. I wrote an article that was graciously published through the fire engineering website. The ISFSI folk asked me to come online and talk about it. And since then, I've been asked to join this group and kind of talk training. And it's been just a phenomenal experience since. And I think amongst the group right here, just looking across, I'm still like in that surreal stage where I guess I'm still the newcomer here. And, I've been following the training traditions folk for a long time. Chief Halton, I've talked to him a bunch since first getting in touch with him, and same thing with Chief Heller, and just everybody here in some way, shape, or form has definitely passed on something to me, whether they've known it or not. So the word surreal is still kind of on the tip of my tongue right here. But that being said, I think training is where it's at. I'm a huge advocate for training. It's my passion. I believe it's the path. I believe it's the way. I believe it's the angle. I believe that if you're not given total respect and support to your training bureau, you are doing something wrong. Training is the way to get to everybody in your organization. A good example, I was just talking to the person that just took over for me in training in Fort Lauderdale. And over the next 2 months, we're doing some classes where we're going to see 3/4 of our fire department. We're going to see 3/4 of our fire department in a 2-month time span. That platform is unequaled anywhere else in the organization. So that it's not even about the content. It's about getting out there, seeing people, laying your hands on people, checking the pulse of the organization, finding out what makes them tick, what's going on, clarifying things, killing false news and fake news and all that jazz. So I'm a big avid trainer. I'm honored to be with y'all. I love talking training, and every time I come here, I get pumped up. So I'm just happy to be here. And before I keep going off on this tangent, I'm just going to say thank you. This is a good thing still.
And I'll throw out too, if everyone's watching, everyone you're seeing on the screen today will be teaching at FDIC. So, and our friends from Traditions Training, Dan and Doug, have agreed to keynote for 2021. So we're going to have that to look forward to. That'll be really exciting. And then keynote. So we're going to try a brand new thing in 2021, which is kind of an interesting thing, right? When you're doing training, I think even when you're running a conference, you have an opportunity to try different stuff, innovate. So we're going to have Dan and Doug do the traditions training, the whole mantra, the purpose, how that encapsulates, what training is really about, working as a team, right? Not just training the individual, but training the group. And then we're going to have the Conley brothers, Larry and David, are going to do their thing. So we're going to have 2 teams keynoting for FDIC 2021, which is like, I've never heard of it before. So I think it's kind of cool. And if it works out, I'll take full credit. If it blows up completely, I'm blaming Larry Schultz. So
I can tell you how it's going to work. Dan can't talk without Doug, and Doug can't talk without Dan. They can't do individual classes.
Right. And Larry can't talk without David, and David can't talk without Larry. So it's like a perfect blend. So one of the things
it'll be the best looking group.
Uh-oh.
I said it will be one dang fine looking group. I apologize. I put my notepad down on the stupid keyboard thing. So I love this group. So I had as the flaneur, as kind of the kind of guy hanging out on the edges here editorially. I had a couple of questions for you guys. I think this would spurn some conversation. I always like to look at the incidents from the day before around the country, and now we can do that so quickly with the web, fireengineering.com, Firefighter Nation. They're always putting up some really interesting things. And I noticed that we had firefighters involved in a collapse in California and firefighters involved in a collapse in Indianapolis. And in the Indianapolis one, it was a hoarder home. And I just perused the California one this morning. I believe that was a roof job, if I'm not mistaken. Did anybody read it? Anybody look at it more closely? Good to see you.
Not the Indianapolis one.
Yeah, I looked at the Indy one. So anyway, I think it's interesting when we're doing training, and especially when if you look at the news of the day, all you got to do is go to any website. If you're a company officer or even if you're a firefighter and you're just looking to bring in something for the day, you could look at any of those news reports, and they're not full of a bunch of detail, right? It's all preliminary stuff. But even if we just take the Indy, it's a house fire. The PIO, Rita Wraith, she tells us that there was hoarding conditions, and they fell through a floor. No one's seriously injured, but it raises all kinds of issues as to self-rescue, hoarding conditions, floor stability, all of those things that we talk about in training, and you can pick out any piece of it, and there's all kinds of important takeaways that the drills you could do for the rest of the day could be really built off of 1, 2 or 3 paragraph incident report, news report that's really. And what I like about it too is the lack of detail almost makes it better. You know what I mean? Because you can read into it like, well, what would we do if, and how could that have happened without being pejorative? In other words, why would a floor give out? What kind of floor might it have been? Well, what if it was this kind of floor, that kind of floor? You know what I mean? And then what about fuel loading and just weight? Dead weight on a floor, dead weight on a roof, so I love those kinds of opportunities, and especially as a. And I get it. Steve was talking earlier about if you're the training chief, and I agree with them, with a training division, you really can do a lot to influence your organization. But you've got to plan ahead. You've got to go out. For the company officer or the battalion chief or the district chief or whatever, the commander, like every day is an opportunity to find something, whether it was a rope rescue in there, a swiftwater rescue in the news or something, and just look at what you're doing and then build off what you're doing really well. So what I thought we'd do is just kind of talk about what you're doing in your organizations when it comes to, say, floor collapse and firefighters, self-rescue, or firefighters needing, assistance getting out, and what are some of the components that you're looking at or you would look at. And this is totally unscripted, which I think is kind of cool too. Just what are you doing inside your agencies? What experiences have you had? And what do you think some of the key points to take away when you see something like that, or you'd bring up with your crew, like, hey, make sure we've got this on the rig, or hey, make sure this assignment's backed up, or hey, this is why we do this or that, or just throwing it out there.
Larry, I guess I saw Chief Halton was referring to Indianapolis and California, but I guess we had 4 firefighters fall into the basement in Baltimore City today also.
That's right. It was Baltimore. I'm sorry, you're right, Ricky. It was Baltimore and it was Indy. Baltimore.
Indy, yes. So, I mean, obviously, Larry's jurisdiction borders Baltimore City, so I'll leave
Yeah, it
you
was
into that one.
interesting. Yeah, it was like anything else. It starts off, I'm at the gym this morning and somebody sends me a quick text and says, Mayday in Baltimore. So, we all connections across. We know a lot of people in Baltimore. A couple of our traditions training instructors work there. So I jumped over and was kind of listening. So I jumped in really kind of, I guess, right after the floor collapse had happened. So, we're seeing these. We continue to see these at a regular rate. These floor collapses and the various scenarios. And there's, again, I want to say the way that Chief Halton put this is important, right? So there's one train of thought that says, don't rush to judgment, and we shouldn't. Don't be pejorative. We shouldn't. We also shouldn't pass up an opportunity to use the scenario to gain greater understanding on the issue. So if you look at the video, if you read the paragraph and you start providing answers to a scenario you don't even know about, that's where you're getting off track. If you use the scenario to ask your group and yourself questions, legitimate questions, trying to dig in, find answers, seek a greater understanding, that's never a bad deal, right? Don't start off with the answers, start off with the questions, and maybe you work your way there. I think locally, what we're doing here in Anne Arundel County, we just completed our Fall Skills program. Fall Skills was a 3-month focus operationally, and our focus was on basement fires. Looking at the information on the Mayday project or Project Mayday, we still are having challenges with the floor collapses, either from undefined, unnoticed basement fires, or like you were talking about in Indy, where you have excessive loading on one of the floors due to hoarding. But we did we brought every company in and did about a 2-hour presentation on basement fire. Of course, we started off with the lessons learned from Chariot Road. That's very near and dear to my heart, from Washington, D.C. We kind of walked through that incident, what occurred, and then kind of began to really talk a little bit more about basement fires. To go along with what I started with, the task was not to deliver a class. It was to engage the people in the room in a conversation and allow them to ask questions, allow debate, healthy dialogue. All that was critical at trying to get to the right answers. So we didn't start out giving them the answers to the tests. We really put the information up there and kind of let the group run, and the battalion chiefs who taught the class were really facilitators. But that was our 3 months focus. Again, it was on unnoticed, undefined, unrecognized basement fires, and the challenges of working above, one of which is collapse. So those two kind of correspond with each other, And I think in the last few weeks, we've seen some good results just from having the discussion about the challenge of basement fire and floor collapse.
Dan Shaw?
Yeah. So, what I like about these conversations where they're not scripted is I just kind of jotted down 4 things right off the top of my head that came to mind when Larry was talking and Bobby was talking about it. And I think it comes back to a few things. One, because we're talking about training, right? We don't know any of the background what happened in the incident. And I think this is what you guys are alluding to. These type of incidents are just affirmation of why we train. This could happen to us today. The fire always gets a vote. So we got to be prepared and take care of what we can take care of. So, we go back training. Building construction used to be, a foundation, for lack of the analogy to it, in any firefighter's training. And that has sorely been missing over the years of people reading Brannigan's book and really understanding it. And generationally, you match that with as many people may not be in the trades as they were. So the institutional knowledge is in there. And I would always use Larry's quote of knowing your building stock is truly knowing what you're built, what fires are you going to? And when stats and data are looking us right in the face, telling us that every 64 seconds in the United States, you're going to a residential building fire. And it's going to be one of probably 6 fires, where it's either in the attic, it's in the garage, it's in the bedroom, it's in the kitchen, it's in the basement, or it's outside to inside. Then we should be planning for that event and knowing how the building's going to act when it's on fire. So you don't need to know all the terms. And if you do, great. If you don't understand what lolly columns and lintels are, that's fantastic. But you should be able to look at a building and go, I expect this building to act this way. We've dropped just about 8 people through floors during the course of fires in the last 2 years, and no injuries from them. And some have been full collapses with 4 guys going in the basement after the fires are extinguished, to just parts of the body falling through floors, and they were all ply eyes. They're great for the building construction industry and they can carry a load, but when they're subjected to fire and you put 200 plus pounds and a bunch of those dead loads on top of it, you will see that that's a problem. The second thing comes to mind: fire behavior knowledge, right? Understanding how fires are acting. It's a common thing that people want to drop and say, hey, the fires are hotter. They're just as hot. They're getting to that temperature very quick. But more importantly, what is our knowledge base on that? And if you look historically across the history of the fire service from the 60s to now, if you put it on a scale, the fires are flashed over at 20 minutes, back in grandma's furniture, to 3 minutes. And then we took firefighters from 3/4 and no SCBA, and we fully encapsulated them. And so they can go deeper and further into a fire that's getting hotter quicker. And with the introduction of oxygen by us fine gentlemen and ladies who show up and throw it in there.
Oh,
You just froze on me, but just to continue.
Bigger. But then if you look at the training, 4 hours back in the 60s.
Keep going, Dan. You just came back.
Okay. Yeah. If you look at the hours of fire behavior training, it was 4 hours back in the 60s. Hasn't changed. So you have an uneducated firefighter being subjected to a fire that is much more violent and is fully encapsulated. So, versus back in the day with 3/4 and no SCBA, you had to understand fire behavior or you weren't making that back room. You got the instant feedback that, hey, you're not going any further until you either ventilate or put water on this fire. And then, I kind of fast forward to where we are now and the importance of the lap. One of the things we hammer on in our training is a basic elementary function that a lot of times it gets lost, even with incident commanders. If I walk up to a command post and say to a battalion chief, what is on fire? And if they can't answer that question, that they didn't listen. They're not looking at the building. And a lap should be our ability to go around and say, there's where the fire is. Here, how am I going to isolate, confine, and compartment this fire? Now let's extinguish it. So where do I put my hose lines? And the best way to get the seat of the fire to keep it compartmented to where it is and allow the trucks and rescue to go do searches. And so when we teach about a lap, it's not just for your fitness to run around the building. It's for you to get intelligent information to build your strategy and tactics based upon what you see. And that should be communicated and then to the incident commander, to all the other units that are coming, to say, hey, this is where the fire is. And it always comes back to is I could look at the key elements in my own organization where fires didn't go well, and we probably didn't know exactly where the fire was. And we were chasing around a structure, and now you got to try to backtrack. How do I figure out where the fire is and mount my attack appropriately? And not jamming 4 hose lines to the front door, but locate, confine, compartment, and extinguish the fire. And then lastly, is the RIT. When RIT was rolled out, I remember conversations we had when we did 1407, the standard for RIT training. There was a thought process that, like, it was the SWAT, the coup de grace, the best of the best to show up and save, but they wouldn't arrive for 25 minutes. So the fire would just wait until your best guys show up. No, that's not reality. I mean, for us, it's the fourth engine, which is going to have a probationary firefighter on it. Might have a brand new captain as the officer, and the other two firefighters, you're not sure what their tenure would be. But what we tried to break the mentality of was specifically guys would show up and want to put the equivalent of a rescue squad in the front yard, and that was like, check, I'm good. But I've never heard anyone called a mayday and needed 3 chainsaws and 2 Stokes baskets. What they need is air and water. So for us, engine companies are RIT. I want you to have a hose line, and I want you to have air for the firefighter. Now, we're fortunate we get additional resources as soon as we have a working fire to kind of bring us additional tools. But if one of our members falls to a hole in the floor and a RIT has to be activated, I want you to be able to keep the fire off them or take care of the problem, and I want you to make sure they have air until we can get them out of their structure. So just some, just random thoughts that pop in my head as soon as you guys started talking about that to just reaffirm the training we do so that it's relevant to the fires we go to.
If I could just jump in before Aaron goes really quickly. I know Aaron's wants to jump in next. There is so much to unpack in what you just said that I think is really important. Probably not the least that, air and water, that's all they need in hell too, which is a great way to remember it. Because basically those people, when they're trapped like that, they're in hell. They're in the best example of hell you could probably ever want to come up with. So the second thing is, and this is really important, you mentioned that you had 5 or 6 incidents where people went through floors and collapses and went fine, came out. One of the things I think we do poorly in the fire service is capture those, right? In other words, the Indy guys are fine, the Baltimore guys are fine. You'll bump some bruises, you fall through a floor, that's to be expected, right? But they're not dead. And if someone had died, we'd be all over this. We got to capture the lessons, da 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 da. And I get it, that's important, and I totally understand why we need to do that. I'm not diminishing that, but probably more importantly is to look at the 5 or 6 that you had, to look at the Indy, to look at the Baltimore, and say, okay, some guys and gals went through the floor, they're fine. What did they do that they're fine? You know what I mean? That they're going to be back to work in a couple of days. Maybe they've got a scrape or bump or bruise or whatever. That we focus with righteous determination when something goes horribly wrong and unintended, and then we just ignore those 6, 7, 8 instances where it didn't. What did we do? We should be capturing that, and because you move towards your pictures, right? The old adage, don't think of a black horse in a green meadow next to a white picket fence. Don't think of a black horse. All you can do is think of the bloody black horse because you think in pictures. So if all we study is failure, and we start to explain failure with failure, which is even more stupid. You could be in Congress with that attitude. So, which is where I think we put all our criminally insane people these days. But and Epstein didn't kill himself. Got to get that in every episode. But the important thing to take away here is we should be looking at the events that went right, not just the ones that went wrong. We should be writing about, speaking about, talking about, sharing those events where, hey, something unforeseen happened. We came out of it fine because we drilled on getting air and water to them quickly. We drilled on self-rescue. We drilled on staying calm under pressure. We drilled on having 2 means of egress. We drilled on no line goes in on a company without a backup line. Backup line means backing up the first line. It doesn't mean going around to the exposure. It's the backup line. So things like that. That's capture. I just want to throw that in. I didn't mean to interrupt Aaron. I just got really excited listening for actually kind of the first time I think Dan said anything I paid attention to. I'm just kidding. Joke.
Well, it took a few years.
It's a joke.
Know my wife.
It's a joke. So, but I mean, that's what I wish we would do more of, right? Capture the things we're doing well. And I also was very pleased to hear you say, okay, and this is just because I like actual real science and not make believe science. The fires are not hotter. They're getting hotter faster, but they're not hotter.
Big
Heat
distinction.
release rates are more explosive due to polymers and how they break down and their fragile bonds. But the fires are not hotter. Anytime somebody says that or writes that, they don't know what they're talking about. And I get 2 or 3 articles. I'm publishing one right now where the guy says that, and I'm leaving it in there because he are dumb. So
So Bobby, just to echo for your point, I have to give credit to. So Sacramento Fire issued a close call report after one of their guys fell on the floor, and the second guy went to go get him out, and they were in the basement. And he ended up getting burned. And the first guy got out, and so we put all 1,500 of our members through that scenario, based solely about Sacramento. Say, hey, let's see if our guys would do the same thing. They did the same exact thing. And reaffirm to say, hey, look, we have a Messiah complex. So we want to go get our own. And how do we defeat that? How do we break that mentality that, look, the best thing you could do is put the fire out, then get him out. So kudos to the Sacramento Fire Department for sharing it, because that was the catalyst for the training. Was a well-written report for us to subject our people to and say, hey, well, we do the same thing. Now, how do we fix that?
And the lesson to capture also for a training officer like yourself, let's do it on ours too. Let's share with other people what we did. Right, wrong, indifferent, what we might want to do differently. Because remember, every fire is going to have something slightly different about it. No one's ever gone to the same fire twice. You just can't do it. It's impossible. They're similar, but they ain't the same. Sorry, Aaron.
No, that's good. This is great stuff. This is our problem is that this is only an hour, and that's really our problem, because this could be 3 days at a session with all the knowledge and all the good experience that's on this panel. So jumping on that point, you're talking about Chief Schultz talked about Baltimore this morning, and I saw that come across and immediately clicked to it. Same thing, listening. One thing that I thought of yesterday was my first day as the duty chief in the car after 30 years on an engine. And my acting time in the car yesterday was officially okay. It's really yours. And I was thinking about, all right, how do I not screw this up? Number one, because as they say, keep your head down and don't screw up the first week, which I probably already did. But all the runs I took in were in different styles and different types of construction yesterday. And I took a bunch of runs in. It started with a gas leak in Town Hall. And Town Hall is an old, ordinary constructed building, built in the 20s or 30s, 2 stories plus, 3 stories plus a basement, and just a train wreck of a building if you actually get a job in there. And it came in as a gas leak, a heavy concentration of gas in the building. So there's one. We wrap up that, and I go right to an alarm in a probably 5-year-old non-combustible office building, typical of what we're getting all over the place now in suburban urban areas, right? And that turned out to be a heater malfunction. It was a heater motor on fire that seized up and filled the place with smoke. And then last night we catch a little job in a taxpayer in an old area of town, and it's a little old barber shop, and it's the true style of taxpayers where we've got apartments upstairs, we've got apartments to the rear that are only accessible from the rear of the alley, and we've got business fronts all the way across the front. And the guys handled each one of them as I would hope they would, and I didn't screw it up too badly in the beginning. But the bottom line of it was, as I was driving home from the firehouse this morning, I'm thinking to myself, look what we expect our people to understand. I got 30 years. A bunch of guys on this panel have 30 or 40 years. I get it. We've had a lot of experience, but I'm looking at that first due truck company, and the captain was great on the fire last night. They caught it with a can. The engine stretched the line, and they had the thing in place. But I'm thinking, so we got a great captain, but he's got a young crew. The captain of the engine's a very young guy. We're expecting them to be able to safely operate and really beyond safely operate. We want them to be able to get in, make the hit, do the job, and come out of this the way we're supposed to. And it's a lot more than it seems when you look at it in that bigger scope, as opposed to how to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And yet here we are, and we expect this, and then we wonder, well, geez, how come guys got hurt? How come this happened? How come they didn't recognize that the floor was going to collapse when you had a hoarder condition or when you had extended fire in the basement, and never understood that you had fire in the basement. So these are the things that really jumped out at me in this conversation. Uh, is really, really important to me, just based on yesterday. Another kind of interesting point to that is a kid comes into my office yesterday and says, "I'd like to join the fire department." Kid out of the blue, and I look at him, and this kid's dressed like he just came off a construction site. When I asked him, I said, what do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm in the carpenters union, but some of the guys in the local said I should become a volunteer fireman." And we don't really have much volunteer firefighting left in our area, but we do still accept guys, and then they're kind of our farm system into the job. But I thought, wow, a tradesman. When was the last time a tradesman came to our firehouse, whether we were hiring him off the street or whether he was a volunteer, compared to the old days when we all had somebody that was a tradesman or did something? So all these things, it goes back to that building construction, just like Dan said, just like Ricky has said, and Chief Schultz. If we know it, we can operate in and on it and under it. If we don't understand it, we're just asking for that fatal move. And this conversation really highlights it. So I got plenty more, but I want you guys to talk. I know we only got so much time left. I'll catch my breath.
So I'll jump in if you guys don't mind. So one of the things that Chief Alton, you did right from the beginning that we try to do every time we do a training class, no matter what it is insert the relevant content, insert the news articles, insert what happened today, what happened yesterday, what happened in the last week that is relevant. Not only does it show you that you're paying attention to what's relevant out there, it shows you're relevant. It shows you've got the pulse on what's going on. You're not just locked in the past. You're relevant. You're paying attention. You're paying attention to what's going on out there at a moment's notice, that day even. So I'm glad that you started it off with it. It's a perfect way to start it. One of the things that our department's doing this year is we're going to the back to the basics. As I'm passing the training bureau over to the next training chief, he's going back to the basics. And when you talked about some of the things you mentioned, the hoarder conditions, the collapses, RIT, firefighter rescue, you have to be good at the basics if you're going to be prepared for the unprepared or the advanced. You have to be good at the basics. Now, I come from a place where we're darn good at what we do in the Lauderdale area and the surrounding apartments. We're darn good. And every time I go to a call, every time I go to a fire, just standing back and having the opportunity to watch our folk work, it's like an orchestra, and it's just beautiful. But we don't rest on our laurels. We constantly are training. We're constantly practicing. We're constantly taking what we know and trying to maximize that so that our baseline is so solid that whatever happens on top of that baseline, we are prepared for it. So I love doing the back to basics training. But one of the things that really hit home with me is what you said about lessons learned. We had a fire sometime back last year, near the end of the year, where it was a rather large house in one of the ritzier parts of Fort Lauderdale. Two-story house, but the whole bottom floor of the house was basically where this gentleman kept a bunch of fancy cars, Rolls Royce, I think it was a Prius in there, maybe a Bugatti, just random expensive cars. They had a lot of challenges in this fire, and through the training bureau, we made a lessons learned module from it. But what struck me is that from the division chief on down, they were honest, they were transparent, they were open. I love that when you hear it from the upper levels, when you have a chief level officer that was on scene, either in command or safety or whatever, saying, this is what we did right. Oh, by the way, this is where I either did something wrong or could have done better. That gives permission every spot down the line from the firefighter up to go, you know what? I have now been given permission to say the same thing. I messed up. I'm okay saying I made a mistake. And here's what I learned from it, kind of like you were saying before. What can I learn from this? How do we all progress as a group? So the lessons learned thing I'm very, very passionate about. Some of the best training opportunities or the best training classes or drills we put together in the past 5 years were all based on lessons learned, whether it was challenges with polycarbonate windows instead of wood, whether it was accidents that happened on scene or whatever the case was. It seemed like we got most bang for the buck for those and the most buy-in instantly. So between talking about the most recent events like you were talking about or internal issues with departments and such, I got to tell you that right there, the lessons learned portion, if you're not getting the value from a lessons learned, if you're not taking a potential catastrophe and using that for training content, you're doing something wrong. But like you said before, it's not just about the things that go wrong. What went right, and why did it go right? What made that go right? What does right look like? And passing that on to your crews.
Sorry about that. I was taking a bunch of notes. So, Chief Schultz, I know you probably just listening to the Stephen talk, and I know you as well as I know you. I know you got something to follow up on that.
I'll just kind of say this again as the clock's ticking, and it's been interesting listening to everybody. I want to hear more from them. I think so. So Aaron, he threw the nugget out there. Is we talked about this show, and what we would talk about. One of the things was what's kind of the hot topic that individually we're focusing on, and Aaron kind of hit that piece in a really big way. And you and I have talked a lot about this. We were just up in Pennsylvania a couple weeks, and we started to engage the group up there in it. Is we've all have been working, reading lessons learned, just consuming ourselves with every opportunity to try to figure out why fireground errors occur. And we think we get the answer. We develop a program. We get it out there. There is no lack of training out there, right? There's a million training companies. You got fire engineering where anybody could go to a website or a conference and get every bit of training that's out there. So it's not access to training, right? It's got to be more to that. And I think what Aaron talked about that I've just been infatuating myself with for the last couple of years is the complexity of what we're asking our fireground officers to do, right? To identify critical factors after 15 seconds of a size up, having to make a radio transmission, only getting 10% of the information that's available to them from the exterior, and then happen to make that first decision, which is do we engage and where do we engage from? The complexity of what we're asking them to do with minimal time, minimum knowledge is overwhelming to anybody. And I don't care how much time you have on the job. It's overwhelming. And that's why, future shows where we can begin to unpack and try to understand why human error exists, right? Gordon Graham's talked about that forever. Talk about a lot of the stuff that we've been doing at Traditions, and I know many other training companies have. Fairfax County's been doing a lot of work, and that's stress inoculation. How do we inoculate people in training with stress so that they can hone those skills of how to make critical decisions with no time and no information? So thanks for bringing that up to Chief Heller. I think it is the key. I think if we could ever resolve that problem, we could really start to make some headway. But until we do, that it's possible that we may not be getting as much traction as we need to.
So,
Chief Bobby?
Yeah. So I think, Larry, I think you said some really interesting things. And I think there's a couple of things to take away there. First, Steve, just to correct you, a Prius is not a classic car. It's a piece of crap. And so don't confuse that with anything of value. That's not a car that anybody on this panel should ever be seen riding in or near. So that's a virtue signaling piece of garbage. But anyway, that being said, as a car guy, I'm just saying that as a car guy. Because what was interesting was they took the Echo offline to put the Prius in. The Echo was a combustion engine that got about 40 to 45 miles to the gallon. It's the official car of Bahrain, by the way. But that car was amazing. And you could pick one up for about $5,000. And after you get about 250,000 miles on it, you got to replace the tires and maybe a battery. And that's it. Those cars will run forever. And then they replaced it with the Prius, which it was the big green thing, but got about half, maybe 3/4 of the mileage, has a battery you got to replace for about $5,000 every 5 years. But we felt good about it versus the Echo that nobody felt good about, but I still own mine. And I drive it. It's my beater car, my airport car. Anyway, that's a car thing. But to Larry's points, what's interesting is if you think about it, an error is only an error in hindsight. To the people who were making that decision at the time, why we got to look at the things that went right, they thought it was going to work, or they wouldn't have done it. No one does something to just there are some oddballs out there, but firefighters, cops, airline pilots, doctors, what we do is called the local rationality principle. So we take actions thinking they're going to be successful. Now, something in our assessment, we missed some key indicator, or some key indicator was invisible to us for whatever reason, and that caused our decision to not turn out the way we had hoped. And then it looks like a mistake or an error, or it's classified that way. So that's an interesting construct right there. But to your other point, you're exactly right. And we've been talking about the new view of human error for years. I've been speaking on it, teaching on it, which we're starting to get a little bit of traction in the fire service. Dr. David Woods was the person who really started it. Then you've got Decker and all kinds of people that have come after him. So there's a plethora of great books out there, everything from Behind Human Error by Woods to 10 Questions to Ask by Decker to, and then we get into the whole just culture issue and systems. And then you've got Holnagel, whose most recent book, Systems 1 and 2 and Safety Differently. And so there's a lot to unpack there. But you're exactly right. Antonio Damasio, one of the leading cognitive researchers in the world, has taught us that under pressure and stress, in a situation where you have conflicting goals and limited information, you can make about 4 complex decisions. In other words, where to spot your apparatus, in or out, what's the biggest threat, and maybe giving a couple of assignments. Then you're done if you're alone. And so our biggest flaw, in my opinion, was exactly what you spoke to, Larry. We're expecting one individual, the incident commander, or even more insanely, the first arriving. That's not what we should be doing. We should be doing some kind of collaborative effort, because the minute someone has assistance, especially from a peer, a trusted peer, they can make exponentially more decisions. It eliminates so much stress. So unknown goals, unclear goals, lack of information, conflicting priorities, lack of resources, all of those things make such a stressful environment. And they're very difficult to recreate in training. They really are, because it's not, we've all been at real fires. A real fire is a real freaking fire. It's like my son's not an airline pilot, he's a Navy pilot, and he does a lot of simulations. And occasionally he'll crash a plane in a simulation. A lot less costly than when he crashes a plane in real life in terms of everything. So we get that when we're on scene, that emotional buildup, those endorphins start rushing, that fog of war, if you will, all of that has to be taken into account. When we're under that kind of pressure, the number one thing we're looking for is assistance. It's companionship. It's a partner. No one becomes Vinnie Dunn or Leo Stapleton or Alan Brunacini just by virtue of the fact that they arrived at a fire first. And even those guys can give you 4 good decisions and then they'd be done. And it's fascinating. So, the systems where you have aides, excellent idea, because you can turn to the aide and generally have a relationship and you can say, what am I missing? Well, boss, it'd be nice if you told somebody to pull a line. Oh yeah, right, pull a line. You need that assistance, right? So Larry's exactly right. It's a dynamically complex environment that's changing with every passing second. It's growing. Fires don't just stay static. They're growing, they're moving, they're changing. We're doing things to affect them. We're opening doors and windows. Windows are breaking. It's finding more fuel, finding different fuel. So that's a wickedly complex situation. And then, to Steve's point from the beginning, add EMS, add high tangle, add hazmat, add the social stuff going on, add violence, add everything else that we've got to deal with in these. You go to what looks to be a residential structure fire, it turns out to be a home business like Crackway or Marijuana is Us, and it's a growing operation or it's a cooking operation. You got a whole different fire, and they might want to be protective of that event. They might, there could be weapons involved. So it's wickedly complex. You're exactly right. And I think what we need to do is to start to look at these things, to quote our moms, in the shoes of the person who was there, and try to figure out why they thought what they decided to do would work. Because none of us has shown up at a fire. And trust me, I have burnt down zip codes. So I mean, I have been trust me. I had nicknames, 10th Alarm Halton, Burn 'em Down Bob. On my last fire as a chief of operations, they dispatched almost the whole department, a chaplain, and a paving company. So, I'm not the gold standard. But what I am saying is that as long as I had a partner, I made better decisions. And so I'm really pushing collaborative command. I'm pushing that no one should be expected to stand outside a building on their own and direct a fire. It's just incomprehensible. Now, you can do it on some really simple operations, and you're getting some good feedback from your team. I think that can be done. But when they get complex, you need help. And even on the simple ones, they work because you're outside. Maybe you're the first due engine, and the second due engine says, "Hey, Bobby, I got your backup line. Anything else you need?" That's all you need to hear. All you need is that support. So sorry to jump in and wax poetic there, but great point.
No, I think that's good. I mean, I kind of listened to all this, and obviously I got a bunch of post-it notes, and you know, as Larry would tell you, I sometimes I'm the bad guy. So he knows that I think we forget those lessons. I mean, you know, you walk around any firehouse, you look at everybody's helmet, and there's all these memorial stickers from all these firefighters, and we put them on our heads, and it doesn't soak through to our brains the lessons that come from those fires. So, you know, you go back to what Bobby was saying, is that, you know, we had this, and what Aaron was saying, he just said, you know, yeah, I had this young captain show up at this call. Well, he has to make those 4 or 5 decisions. And with the command structure, I think a lot of departments have, and Bobby alluded to it, was that, you know, now that this young captain or young lieutenant is taking command, the guy with the most experience, or, you know, the perceived most experience, being the chief officer, is kind of taken out of the equation until he arrives on the scene. And he's not interjecting, "Hey, have you checked the basement? Hey, have you checked the second floor?" So, I mean, those pieces really come into play. And you know, another piece that Bobby talked about is that, you know, having that command team, that, you know, those command teams in there, you know, making sure that somebody's chirping in your ear, because command posts should be absolutely egoless. You know, there should be no egos there. There is a guy there that has to make the decision, but should be enough inputs in there coming into that. Hey, I'm going to make a good educated decision. But once again, if we go to a fire and we hear it going bad and you don't say anything to the guy that's on the scene, then we're just as guilty as the decision that person made, you know, not by their own fault, just like we talked about, you know, good 4 or 5 decisions out of them. But if we don't check the basement, we don't do a 360, or anything like that, and they just focus in on the fire. Being a young company officer, I understand it. But, you know, if we're doing that because that person established command, and we're not having the most senior guy that's responding to the call, or experienced guy, the person of responsibility, who is that chief officer, then we're failing all the way around. So Larry always has a good one. Is Larry, what's the statement about compliance and
Man, you better
you want
remember
people
this,
just to do
Larry.
what they're told? We don't need buy-in.
But yeah, it really is, again, a combination of good decision making, team decision making, and then you know, the culture of compliance, right? Just doing what you're supposed to do, and moving everybody doing their.
Well, and Ricky, to your point, like, you know, when we talk about with incident commanders, is that, you know, there's this just general belief that if they speak on the radio while that company officer's floundering, that they are taking command, and they're not allowed to take command unless they're there. No, that's not the case. I mean, go back to the core reason of why we exist. We exist so we can have your back while you're inside without one of the senses, and not violate the PAL doctrine and put you in harm's way for an unclear purpose. So you should intervene. If that on-scene report is lacking, correct it. If they didn't hear a water supply, correct it. I mean, if you look at the line of duty death reports, the majority of them are a calamity of basic firefighter errors. This domino starts to fall. The next one will fall. So by the time the chief shows up, 6 dominoes have fallen. And what are you going to do? Hold them up? No, I mean, it's already started down this path. But if the on-scene report was terrible, then you calling that company officer and say, "Hey, I copy your report. I need you to give me where the fire is and what exactly they're showing." You know, to that young company officer, that is like the virtual hand on their shoulder saying, "Stop, breathe, orient, now let's execute." And they'll probably only do it once.
And it's not even correcting. It's just assisting, man. You know, that person's doing the best they can under the conditions they found themselves in. All you're doing is lending a hand. And I think that is so critical. And one of the great misnomers that we have, and it comes from Newton and Descartes and reductionism, we can go back 600 years, is that we all believe that A leads to B leads to C. That's total bullshit. That's not how the world works anymore. It's a dynamically complex world. And sometimes A leads to Z and D leads to J, because the interactions of things are just amazing. And we haven't even touched on the ideas of technology making us safer, because that's another illusion. It creates another pathway for failure and all kinds of stuff. But that's a conversation for another day. But that's the kind of stuff I think we can take on heads on in this conversation. And I'm not being pejorative to any system that's out there. I was blessed to be able to help Alan write his Fireground Command, his second edition of it. He was sweet enough to list me on page 3 as one of the people that helped him do it. And I really believed in that early on. I've read now and studied more that leads me to believe that that's a bad idea, that the first due shouldn't assume command. They should really size it up, tell everybody what their crew is doing, and go to work. And then everybody else ought to do the same. And the chiefs or chief ought to help orchestrate and support, and everybody ought to help orchestrate and support with them. No one should be, if we don't need to be the Lone Rangers out there, and yet we promulgated that institution. So sorry to dominate the conversation. I apologize, but great stuff, and that's the kind of stuff I think we're going to see from this group going down the road. And I'll apologize in advance. I probably won't be able to join you much in the upcoming months. I got a few things on my plate, but I know this group is going to have tremendous success. The 1 hour time frame is not a hard and fast, just so the group knows, but it's kind of sort of, because people want to be respectful of their time if they've carved out time to be with us today. And one of the things we forgot to do today was, if you tell the folks #FE Talks, if one of you monitors that during the conversation, you can get questions from folks, and folks can give you their 2 cents and tell you how good your hair is looking, Dan, so they can keep building your morale, just teasing you. We were having hair jokes earlier, which are hysterically funny. So
Chief Schultz is the Twitter king.
He is the Twitter.
He is the Twitter king.
Yeah.
The retweeter. I'm sorry, the retweet queen.
Retweeter. And you realize that 80% of the content on Twitter, according to Pew Research, is created by 10% of the users. And so it's fascinating when you think about that, right? So everybody says that, and they're generally, according to Pew, they're generally females. They're ideologically very liberal, generally pretty angry. And that's Pew talking, not me. So get mad at Pew Research, not me. But if Dan fits that profile, then that's good. And I'm just kidding, Dan. I'm just kidding. Another cheap joke at Dan's expense. So, but what I am saying is that this is going to be a great group, and I'm so glad that the folks from Tradition and the folks from the Instructor Society have agreed to partner in this, and so that we never miss a week where we can talk with serious people about training. And it doesn't need to be any specific group. If just one of you can reach out, so that we always have some credible, reasonable, and sometimes folks that vehemently disagree. There are going to be folks that say, no, the first dude does have to assume command. Good for you. Go ahead. I disagree. And you're welcome to have your worldview and your opinion. Yours will be based on the fires you've gone to. Mine are based on the fires I've gone to. So, and I'm not going to, I won't hold you in any disregard for disagreeing with me or anybody else. And that's kind of what we want. We want to hear people say, well, wait a minute, what about, right? Because there's always that what about. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to my friends from Traditions for jumping in here, and Aaron and Steve, as always, for being here, and to our friends at the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. They'll be at FDIC. They will be doing a meeting and looking for folks to sign up. It's a very worthwhile organization. They do a lot of great training. They also hold a conference annually where they do instructor training stuff. So highly recommend that you look into the International Society of Fire Service Instructors and sign up if you're not a member. Please go to the Traditions Training website. And if you're looking to bring somebody into your job to speak on leadership or tactics or just a plethora of things that they have available, you can't go wrong with working with those folks. And then Aaron has his company as well. And he'll be doing his commercial fireground ops at FDIC this year. It's a workshop, Aaron, right? That is just a phenomenal. It's a hands-on training. I'm sorry. It's a phenomenal hands-on training class, and it sells out. So please, if you want to take Aaron's commercial buildings fires, it will sell out. So, and Steve is teaching, and everybody's teaching. So please go to FDIC.com, check out when they're teaching, fill out your dance card. Don't miss any of these guys. It's just going to be a phenomenal show. We've got Steve Chikarotis keynoting, and if you don't know who Steve Chikarotis is, if you're a fan of Chicago Fire, He's Chief Walker on Chicago Fire, but he was also a subject matter expert for Backdraft way back in the day, and just a storied career in the Chicago Fire Department. Just an incredible human being with a great life story and a tremendous message to share. And then we've got Frank Viscuso, who's just an incredible speaker, an incredible personality, great firefighter, incredible gentleman. He's going to be keynoting us on Thursday, and our featured speaker is going to be John Alston. He's the chief currently up in New Haven. He's an incredible gentleman. He's going to be talking as our featured speaker on Thursday. So we've got a lineup of fire service luminaries that are just off the charts. Mike Dugan will be getting the Lifetime Achievement, and we all know and love Mike. So it's just going to be an amazing program. A couple of classes besides Aaron's. Writ Under Fire will be actually held at the Illinois Fire Services Institute. It's a one-time only, one-of-a-kind class that they're putting together just for FDIC. You don't want to miss out on that opportunity. Writ Under Fire at the Illinois Fire Services Institute. You'll be traveling from FDIC to their location, doing a pre-conference, pre-exercise deal, and then on the back, it's the AAR, the After Action Report, with all the instructors. Phenomenal opportunity. The Writ Under Fire guys, who are friends with all y'all, they're coming back. Their class is going to sell out. Aaron Fields, you got Mike Champo, you've got Chris Minicelli and the Forcible Entry. The hands-on training it always sells out. Please, I can't do anything for you after it's sold out. We do have instructor ratios we have to maintain, so please sign up early, because I just can't help you if you come in late. And then the workshops are just unbelievable also again this year. So sign up now for FDIC and make sure that you get the classes you want to get. And we're really excited. And I'm not kidding. Registration's up by about 25%. So things are selling out a lot faster this year. If you want to get into that hands-on, sign up now, because they sell out, and when they're gone, they're gone. So thank you guys for being here. Thanks for the little shameless plug for FDIC, but I got to pay the bills. This is a commercial operation here. We're a for-profit group, proudly, in the spirit of American entrepreneurism, and we're American entrepreneurs. So, Ricky, why don't you close us out and take it away?
No, I think you've done a great job. That was the only question. I was going to see how FDIC was doing. Once again, we appreciate it. I couldn't ask for two of my best compadres on here, Dan and Larry, who can just by an eye roll tell me I'm doing something wrong. So, and then just having Aaron and Steve on's great. I think it's going to be a good show. We have a large cadre of instructors. So we'll be kind of cycling them through from Roger Steger, who's riding the rear step of Engine 8 Baltimore City, one of the busiest engines in Baltimore City every day, and can give you that take of how they put these fires out in Baltimore City, which they run 2 or 3 a day. To Sam Hittle, but I don't know what Sam actually does, but he does something. So, but he's a good kid. But and then obviously teaming with Stevie Pegram and that group there, and Aaron is going to be phenomenal. So we're excited and happy what's going to come the next couple months.
Well, I guess that's all for us. Anybody got a final word? We're all good.
See you next month.
Love you guys. Take us away, Mr. Producer.